What the heck just happened in Texas? And if you don't live in Texas, why should you care? Well, Texans will say you should care because it's Texas. But here's some other reasons why you should care. And that's because what happens in Texas, especially with respect to the federal elections that we just witnessed as far as the primary side is concerned, it's going to impact the rest of the country. And we saw some major developments take place. For instance, it was a very bad day for people like Dan Crenshaw and Tony Gonzalez, who are both incumbents in Texas. It was a really bad day for Jasmine Crockett, who now has to lose her seat and will not be running for Senate in the great state of Texas. But of course, Jasmine Crockett losing her seat is probably good news for America, even though arguably it's kind of bad news for those of us that enjoyed watching her melt down from the dais. Anyways, we're going to go over and give you the once over the world and everything that just happened in Texas that is significant and why it matters. All on this episode of Making the Argument. I'm your host, Nick Freitas. With me in studio, the Oracle of Virginia and other places as well. I think you predicted every single swing state in the last Trump election by less than 1%.
It was close.
I mean, less than 1%. So he knows what's going on. He knows what's going on. So I brought Christian in to help explain why all of this is super important. All right. So first things first, let's go ahead and bring this up because NBC News, I don't really like them, but they did a good job with respect to actually showing what was going on. So we have this first race that kind of surprised everybody, and that was Steve Toth against Dan Crenshaw. And Dan Crenshaw, obvious incumbent. Dan Crenshaw started off his time in Congress incredibly popular. He got made fun of by what's-his-face on Saturday Night Live, and then they invited Dan Crenshaw on to kind of do a rebuttal, and Dan roasted the guy that kind of roasted him, and it went well, and Dan was kind of flying high there for a while. And then stuff came out with respect to some of the positions he took on things like red flag laws. There was also some issues with respect to a lot of frustration that people have with perceived insider trading going on in Congress. And then there was this whole like blow up between Dan Crenshaw and Sean Ryan. And so none of that was working in Dan's favor. And Steve comes in and Steve just crushed it. I mean, to look at this, look, it's not unusual for an incumbent. Well, I should say that it is unusual for incumbents to lose in primaries. That's unusual, but it does happen. But it usually doesn't happen this big. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the county map here and zoom in here a little bit. He lost everything. And he lost by, I mean, that was a significant defeat.
He lost the early vote. He lost the election day vote. And both of the two, there's two counties that make up Crenshaw's district, Harris County, which is effectively synonymous with Houston, and Montgomery County, which is just to the north. Montgomery County is an overwhelmingly Republican stronghold suburban county. It's like 70% Republican.
When he lost each one, so he
lost both of them in a landslide.
He lost Harris County by 6. He lost the other part of Harris by 6. So Harris is kind of like split. He lost Harris by 6 total, and then he lost Montgomery. That was just crushed.
Montgomery County did not like Crenshaw. And again, Montgomery County is where the Republican voters are.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's illegal to be a Democrat in Montgomery County. So,
well, and to go over some of the issues here, all right, so some of the endorsements. Steve got endorsements from Ted Cruz, which it is a lot of times incumbents, if you're already in Congress, you usually don't endorse against your fellow incumbents. You'll either endorse them or you'll stay out of it. There's very few times where an incumbent will endorse against another incumbent. I've done it before, but that was considered like really bizarre and unusual. But Ted Cruz supported Toth, Turning Point USA, Texas Right to Life. And then you had some other people in there as well. 21 Republican colleagues from the Texas legislature, mainly from the conservative wing. And then he used past support from Donald Trump, who endorsed Toth in his prior 2022 and 24 Texas House races, though Trump notably did not endorse in 2026 congressional primary. Crenshaw was the only Texas House GOP incumbent without Trump's backing. That was significant because even Tony Gonzalez, who I don't think should have got Trump's backing at all, got it, at least temporarily. Now it looks like Trump is not, quote, renewing his endorsement. But we'll get to that race later. So basically, Steve could go in there, and even though he didn't directly have Trump's endorsement for this particular race, he could point out that Crenshaw was the only incumbent Republican congressman that didn't have it. Now, where did Dan Crenshaw get endorsements? Well, one, he got endorsements from Jim Jordan, which I was actually kind of surprised with. He got endorsements from the National Border Patrol Council, the National Rifle Association, and then kind of like a bunch of former people and like Houston City Council member. These things don't really matter, to be honest. But here's the thing you need to understand about things like National Rifle Association and National Border Patrol Council. Whenever you see organizations like that are endorsing, there's usually a mechanism that they use. And if you vote with them roughly, like I think in Virginia, the rule was like 70% of the time. If you voted with a organization 70% of the time, they would either endorse you or stay out of the race. That was the norm. I'm not saying that's a hard and fast rule that they all follow, but like National Rifle Association, as long as you meet the requirements they have, you automatically get their endorsement. And then somebody else, especially a non-incumbent, the best they can get is a score from the survey that they took. And I imagine National Border Patrol Council has the same thing. They have a certain slate of issues, and as long as you vote correctly on those issues, you get the endorsement. Again, not saying that's how they do it. I'm just saying that's the norm. So it's kind of surprising here that when Crenshaw ran in this race, he didn't pick up a lot of powerful endorsements as a 4-term congressman, right? You would have expected a lot more in there. The other thing that like kind of blew my mind here is the fundraising differential. So Dan Crenshaw he raised $2 million. He's $2.1 million. He spent $2,051,000. Compared to Toth, who raised $589,000, only spent $324,000. That is a massive, massive difference. And yet, I mean, not only did it not make the difference overall, but Dan got crushed. Dan got crushed. And this is one of the things that's important about this is that typically, if you have incumbency and you can outspend your opponent like 3-1, you win. Like you win. That almost always happens. Well, he outspent, I mean, I'm not a mathlete here, but he outspent far more than 3-1.
It's almost 4-1.
Almost 4-1. And he was an incumbent, and he was a well-known incumbent. And he got crushed. So this just goes to show that when you look, and the reason why this is so important for all of the Republicans in Congress right now is that what this is demonstrating is that a lot of people who probably thought they were safe because they're incumbents, because they got a lot of cash on hand, because they take enough votes to, remain in the positive graces of certain organizations, they're thinking, well, that's enough. And what this tells you is, no, Republicans are paying a lot more attention than they have before. The other thing that it tells you, though, is if you run a good primary challenger, you can win against a reasonably powerful incumbent, but you have to run a good primary challenger. Right? It's not just anybody that wins. In fact, if we go back to this one right here, there was other candidates here, right? You had this In Plum or Martin Etwop, or like, who are these guys? Nobody knows. And you look at some of these other races, we'll get into the next one here with Brandon Herrera and Tony Gonzalez. You view all candidates. I mean, look at this. You got all these other guys running, and it's kind of clear that they have no chance. They have no chance, but they're taking votes away, and typically they're taking votes away not from the incumbent, but from whoever's challenging the incumbent. And so the difference between something like this is that you can tell in Texas too, that even though you have these other guys running, they got collectively, they got like 1,100 votes between them. So, okay, they ran, but nobody took them serious enough to really get behind them or vote for them. And so all the votes that were going against the incumbent went in one place, and that was to Steve. And that allowed Steve to win overwhelmingly and essentially not have to go to a runoff. Now, in Texas 23, against Tony Gonzalez and Brandon Herrera, Keith Barton, Francisco Canseco, they collectively pulled up over or right around 8,000 votes out of a vote for which about 55,000 votes total were cast. Well, that's a little bit more significant. That's enough. Now, again, I'm not saying that everybody that voted for Keith or everybody that voted for Francisco would have voted for Brandon Herrera. But again, typically speaking, if the incumbent's in trouble, right, people that don't vote for him are going to look for anybody that's running against him. So if it just been Brandon Herrera, let's say that he pulls in 60 to 70% of the votes to these other two guys that really didn't have a chance. Well, does that get him above the 50% mark that he needed to not do a runoff election? he would have had to almost get like 90 to 95% of the votes from the other guys. And there's no telling whether or not he would have been able to achieve that. The other thing that's important to notice here is this is a rematch between Herrera and Gonzalez. And so if had I been in the Texas 23 and anybody had cared about my opinion, I would have said, guys, we don't need a bunch of people running against Gonzalez. If you want to replace Gonzalez, we need one guy that has the best chance of winning. And there's no question that that's Brandon Herrera. There's no question. He's already run against him before and almost won and got massively outspent and was the victim of a horrible smear campaign. Tony Gonzalez got on there and basically accused Brandon Herrera of being a white supremacist and a neo-Nazi, which anybody that follows Brandon, that follows his channel, that knows he is not those things. Like that's absurd.
But Nick, he fired Hitler's buzzsaw.
Yeah, he fired a German machine gun from World War II on a YouTube channel where he fires guns throughout time and history, right? But again, Tony Gonzalez got away with this. So here's the question, right? We know some of the reasons why Toth beat Crenshaw, right? He beat him because Crenshaw had been falling out of favor for a while. He had been caught up on things. Dan had picked some battles that I do not understand why Dan picked them. And then the fight he picked with Sean Ryan, I got to say, right? And I'm not trying to trash Dan, although a lot of people, would probably like me to. I'm just saying, like, stepping back and taking all personality out of it, taking all of your personal feelings out of it, and just looking at it from a tactical standpoint, picking a fight with Sean Ryan, I have no idea why would you want to do that. Now, Dan will say, well, Sean picked the fight with him. It's like, well, but Sean offered you an opportunity to come on his show. And the one thing I will say, I've been on Sean Ryan's show, and I've seen a ton of other people on Sean Ryan's show, everyone from Donald Trump to Gavin Newsom. And what I've noticed about Sean Ryan is he doesn't play gotcha games, right? He will ask you hard questions, but he will give you an opportunity to answer those questions in context, and then he doesn't edit any of it. And yet Dan's lawyers were like, well, if he's going to be on your show, you got to do this and you got to do this. And Sean's like, I'm not doing any of that. I don't do that for anybody. I'm not doing it for you. And so all of those things kind of explain why Dan got beat in his primary. But the fact that he got beat with such a fundraising advantage with incumbency, with all of those things demonstrates that to every other Republican right now that is a little bit shaky on the SAVE Act, you need to understand your seats are not safe. And you might have been able to survive a primary this time around, or maybe you didn't get a primary challenger and you should have this time around. But stuff like this demonstrates to everybody else that, oh, it's really possible to beat these guys. All right. So now going into Tony Gonzalez, what was the difference there?
Oh my gosh.
Well, Tony Gonzalez, dude, this is the biggest thing. Obviously, there's huge differences between Brandon Herrera and Tony Gonzalez on everything from Second Amendment to the border. Tony Gonzalez really he was running as one of these Republicans that was, we need to be more open and inviting on immigration. And then when Trump ran, all of a sudden, Tony Gonzalez is really hard on the border and look at my super cool Navy record. And Brandon Herrera kind of went after him hard in that last primary. And Tony Gonzalez was able to get by on things like the Trump endorsement, which, again, Trump endorses people based off of whether or not they are willing to do what he wants them to do on key issues. And Trump will endorse. That's why Trump endorses people like Lindsey Graham. It's not because Lindsey Graham is the icon of conservative ideology or philosophy. It's because Trump knows that if he calls up Lindsey Graham and says, do this, Lindsey Graham will do it. Right? Whereas Thomas Massie won't. Thomas Massie will stick to his guns regardless. And sometimes you might like that and sometimes you might not. But Trump endorses based off of loyalty, not necessarily rigid adherence to principle. And in a case where you had an incumbent, Trump endorsed him, but now Trump has basically said, I'm not renewing my endorsement, right? Now, the issue is that they're going to go through this, but here's the big thing with Gonzalez. Gonzalez was hit hard by a late-breaking scandal. Allegations of an affair with a former aide, Regina Santos Avelis, who died by suicide, self-immolation. What does that mean? She set herself on fire. Now, Tony Gonzalez is the married father of 6. Regina was the married mother of 1. And the whole thing was Tony Gonzalez was like, this is horrible, but there was no affair. There was no affair. That didn't happen. That's ridiculous. That's rumors. That's scandals. Brandon Herrera is spreading lies about me again. And then the text messages came out, and the text messages were bad. Like, to give you an idea, the text messages showed Gonzalez like constantly asking Regina questions about what sort of like sexual positions did she like. And Regina reciprocated, but she's in the subordinate position. So I'm not absolving her of her responsibility to not have an affair as a married woman with a married man, but there is a power differential in that. And when you look at some of these messages for Tony Gonzalez, again, the married father of 6, to be asking her what sort of sexual position she likes. And let's just say he got real specific. In fact, if you want to go see Brandon Herrera's YouTube channel on this, Brandon Herrera did a video on it where he actually shows the messages. And like I said, we are a very family-friendly show, or we try to be a family-friendly show. And so we're not going to show some of this stuff. Sorry, but go see Brandon Herrera's page on YouTube, and he goes through it, and he's got all the receipts. This is not just Brandon making outlandish claims or accusations because he's running against the guy. Brandon ran against Tony Gonzalez because he disagreed with him on policy. But Tony Gonzalez demonstrated that he betrayed his wife, he betrayed his kids, and he had a very, very lurid affair that ended with, again, her committing suicide by setting herself on fire. I mean, can we all agree that there's something a little weird by that? Typically speaking, you know, again, there's trends with how men and women commit suicide. Men usually do it with a firearm. Women usually do it with pills. Setting yourself on fire is just strange. And I have a feeling there's going to be more coming out about this and why it happened and why it went down the way that they did. But I don't think the story is closed on that one. And so they're going to go into a runoff at this point. And what I am hoping, going back and looking at this, and we'll stick to the county results. This is where you can see what counties Gonzalez won, you know, and what counties Herrera won. What I am really hoping for here is that enough people, and you can see that Gonzalez won in the suburbs of El Paso and San Antonio, and Herrera won in places that are you know, more
mostly
rural,
along the border.
Yeah, and on the border. But what needs to happen here in these other counties is people need to realize that what Gonzalez was up to was horrific for his family, and he does not deserve to get reelected. He does not deserve to get reelected. Look, I like Brandon Herrera. I know some people, maybe they think he's too controversial. Maybe they don't like his language. Maybe whatever it is. I think Brandon is a stand-up guy, and I think he means what he says. And so I'm hoping that he wins this race, and I'm hoping that the people of the Texas 23rd recognize that regardless of what you think about these individual men, how can you accept what Tony Gonzalez did and how it has absolutely ripped apart 2 families? That's the sort of guy, like, I have a hard time trusting with power. Now, some people are going to say, whoa, what about Donald Trump? Like, I get it. That's one of the reasons why when Trump first ran, I had problems with him.
It's also worth noting, and you briefly said it, but we need to drive it home. Tony Gonzalez doesn't just have like a shady personal background based off of this like affair and then this suicide from his mistress. He has a terrible voting record.
Yeah.
Like he is in the upper echelons of the rhinos in DC effectively. I mean, he's bad on immigration. He's bad on guns. He's very bad on guns. Uvalde, everybody remembers that. I remember you and I, with Tina, we did a podcast immediately after that when that broke out. Uvalde's in this district, and Tony Gonzalez, his response to that shooting was federal gun control. Well, the irony is that if you actually hover over Uvalde County, which is it's just to the west of San Antonio. There it is. Right there. Herrera almost got an absolute majority in a 4-way race in Uvalde. Yeah, which is I think that's kind of interesting. But
because you would expect Uvalde to be the one place that might, if people really bought into this narrative that anytime there's a school shooting, then obviously what needs to happen is more federal gun control. You would have expected Uvalde to go with Gonzalez, but they went to Herrera overwhelmingly. I mean, Herrera crushed him in Uvalde. And this goes to the point that we're making is that I was already supporting Brandon Herrera. As soon as Brandon Herrera ran again, I came out and said, yeah, this is the guy. And we talked about his race, and we talked about the top 5 rhinos in America that need to be replaced. Gonzalez was one of them. And one of the things that we talked about was this is the sort of guy you want to take out. You want to take out weak Republicans in otherwise safe districts. And this is a fairly safe district. And Herrera would have a much better voting record for that district. But then when all this other stuff came out, it's like, dude, this guy was, in my opinion, as a hardcore conservative, this guy was already disqualified by his voting record. But now with this, it's like, no, double disqualification. double disqualification, man. He should be out. He should be out. So hopefully Brandon Herrera pulls that off. But listen, with all this tumult, right, with everything that's going on, the one thing that we know unfortunately remains consistent seems to be the federal government's absolute commitment to inflationary monetary policy. It doesn't seem to matter who's in charge. The Fed always prints, and we always have these problems with fiat currency. And that is why you need to start looking at diversifying your investment portfolios with precious metals, because they serve as a hedge against inflation. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a reason why gold and silver have been at all-time highs, and it's because whenever money printer go burr, right, gold and silver does better. Why? Because you can't print more gold and silver. And that's where our partners at Lear Capital come into play, because they can give you all the knowledge, all the education that you need. It costs you nothing to contact Lear Capital and say, hey, explain to me how I actually add physical gold and silver to my 401k, to my IRA. How do I buy physical gold and silver and actually keep it in my own safe? Or how do I keep it in the safes that Lear Capital maintains if you want to do it that way? The bottom line is they can give you all the answers you need on all of these important questions that you should be asking. And all you have to do is go and call Lear at 800-707-4575. That's 800-707-4575. Or you can visit nick4lear.com. That's Nick, the number 4, Lear.com, and check it out. By the way, in 2026, maybe you want to roll over a lot into your 401k or your IRA. Maybe you want to, well, guess what? They actually have a special bonus, $20,000 in gold or silver that apply to qualifying purchases, all right? So you got nothing to lose. Go get a little bit of education. If you like what they have to say, do some business with them. Once again, thank you to Lear for partnering with MTA. Go check them out.
Especially with everything going on in Iran.
Yeah, that's another thing. Okay, so when we go to the governor primary results, not a huge surprise here. Governor Abbott had a couple challengers, but like nothing of real substance. He got 1.7 million votes in his next closest challenge. I mean, he had a ton of challenge. Look at all this. Look at all the people running here. It's like I look at this and it's like, what is the point of this? Do these guys have books coming out? Like, what are they doing? Right?
Was that a self-ding? Are you running for governor?
No, I'm not running for governor. Right? I just wrote a book and then didn't run for governor. Pete Chambers was the only one that got something significant. He had 237,000 votes, so 11%. And then everyone else was fighting for like less than 2% of the ballot here. But Governor Abbott won with 1,740,982 votes. Now, over in the Gina OSR, I want to show you guys something here. So she won the Democrat primary fairly strongly. I mean, her next closest candidate got only 9.8% of the vote. Same thing. You had a ton of people running that never had a shot. Don't know what they were thinking. But look at her website. When you go on her website for Gina OSR, here are her priorities. She only lists 3 priorities: quality and accessible healthcare for all Texans, and affordable Texas that works for everyone. And I love this, back to basics education. I fight for neighborhood schools alongside both union teachers and MAGA moms, because it doesn't matter what political party you are. It's all about putting our kids first. I mean, my gosh, if you looked at that, you would think to yourself, wow, we've got a pretty conservative Democrat here. Maybe Democrats have finally got the message and they're running somebody that is a little bit more of a moderate, maybe more of a pro 2A, maybe more of a, run on affordability. Nope. It's all the Abigail Spanberger model, because bam, here's their voting records on things that matter. When Texas, because she is in the state house in Texas representing Austin. And when the state house said, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have gender reassignment surgery for minors. Nope, she voted against it, right? Maybe we should defund DEI at public universities. Maybe we shouldn't be having public universities spending your tax dollars to push racism. Nope, voted against it, right? No, maybe we shouldn't have drag shows for minors in Texas. Nope, she voted against it. I mean, the list goes on. When you look at all of this stuff, there wasn't. She wanted to kill school choice.
That's right? So funny, because she put that in her list that just suggest, like, she's strongly hinting on her website that she supports some form of school choice. Yeah, that's what she's hinting on her site, and then she votes against it when she has an opportunity.
Yeah. How about combating critical race theory in public schools? Nope, she voted against it. Like, it doesn't matter what strengthening property rights by combating eminent domain abuse. Voted against it. I mean, you go around with everything barely at any time. Where did she vote conservative? Allowing curbside sales and delivery of alcoholic beverages. She voted conservative on that one.
That passed 144 to 1.
Yeah. So. No TikTok on government devices, 139 to 2. Right? So like if you look at all of this, she is a dyed in the wool. This is the Virginia model. You remember how we warned everybody about this? We're like, look, you're looking at all the craziness in Virginia right now, and you're thinking, well, that's Virginia. This is the same model. This woman represents the same sort of model that they ran in Virginia, where all they're talking about is affordability. We just want to go after these rich, fat cats, and we want to make sure everyone has health care. No, what they want is government-run health care. They want socialized health care. And then they want complete control of your education system because they want no school choice, no vouchers. And then when she had to actually, I stand by MAGA moms for our schools. Okay, well, MAGA moms don't want gender reassignment surgeries for their children. MAGA moms don't want you pushing DEI and critical race theory in public schools. So where was she on any of those core issues that matter to MAGA moms? Voting against them. But once again, she's going to run on, common sense, affordability. But when you take 5 seconds to look at her actual voting record, there it is, baby. There it is. In fact, what's her lifetime score? What's her lifetime rating from from CPAC, the American Conservative Union? 5.26. That's what she gets out of a possible 100. 5.26.
Look at the trend line there. That's kind of interesting.
She's getting worse
over time.
She's getting worse over time, but she's passing herself off as, I'm just a common sense mom, just like Abigail Spanberger. Vote for me. Like her weakest issues are on education, taxes and budget spending, and human dignity. That's her worst issues. Worst issues. So the bottom line is like, look, do I think she's going to beat Abbott? No. But it's obvious there's going to be a ton of money spent in this election. And again, the more Abbott runs, again, there gets to a certain point where people get a little bit tired of you.
He's running for, I believe, a 4th term.
Yeah, I think, will this make him the longest serving governor in Texas history?
Rick Perry was there for a long time.
Yeah, was he there for 6 terms? I can't remember.
Let me look it up. I'll tell you.
But anyways, yeah, so I just want you to know that she's doing this Abigail Spanberger model of, I'm just common sense. I'll work with anybody. I just want to do what's best for the children. This woman voted against making it illegal to mutilate the genitals of gender-confused minors. So just understand she's full of crap, just like Abigail Spanberger is, but she's going to try to gaslight the people of Texas, and the media is going to help her do it. All right, let's look at what's arguably the one that a lot of people are watching the most closely in Texas, and that was the Senate primary. And the Senate primary was super interesting for a couple of reasons. One, John Cornyn, who's the current incumbent, got 41.9% of the vote. Ken Paxton, who's the current attorney general running for the seat, there's no question that John Cornyn is your typical moderate establishment Republican. And Ken Paxton is your hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool conservative coming for you. And so the question is, okay, well, did John Cornyn perform better than anticipated? Well, once again, look at all the people in the race. And what you see is that there was only 3 people that had any sort of actual race. Everybody else was competing for about 1% of the vote. Wesley Hunt was I would say he was a serious candidate in the sense that he's been a popular congressman from Texas, but he only got 13.5% of the vote. So what this really means is chances are if you voted for Wesley Hunt, you were probably in his district, and we'll look at the map here. You probably just personally like Wesley. But if Wesley wasn't in there, you probably weren't voting for John Cornyn. I mean, was that fair?
It's hard. John Cornyn is one of the worst Republicans in the U.S. Like, to give you an idea of how bad Cornyn is, his closing pitch, and the last 2 or 3 days of this primary was, vote for me so I can get amnesty passed in Congress. He wants to provide amnesty to something like 10 million illegals that entered this country during the Biden wave.
Yeah.
And that was his closing pitch. He was like, I think we can get this thing done. Do you have no idea what Republican primary voters want right now?
Yeah.
They want all these people gone. They don't want them permanently in our country, much less given amnesty and a pathway to citizenship. That's how you lose the country. And again, somebody like Cornyn, I think he's just from a bygone era. He doesn't understand what time it is. He's operating on this
trying to appeal to the
neoconservative, compassionate conservative, Chamber of Commerce, George Bush style. late 90s, early 2000 Republican. The beautiful losers, basically, that Samuel T. Francis talks about. Like, that is John Cornyn. And Cornyn's closing pitch was, vote for me to get amnesty.
Well, and the interesting part too is I don't like some of these times you look at this stuff and you wonder, because Texas has open primaries, but they had a very contentious Democrat primary, so the chance of a lot of Democrats voting in the Republican primary was minimal.
Statewide, it was pretty low.
Yeah, pretty low. So you did have a lot of presumably Republicans vote for John Cornyn, but again, for a powerful incumbent to almost lose the majority vote to Ken. However, Ken is also a statewide figure, but he's had some controversies. He's made some people.
I believe he's been impeached once by the legislature.
Yeah, they tried to impeach him and they didn't remove him from office, but they impeached him. And again, with a Republican controlled legislature, the thing you need to understand about Republican control of the Texas legislature, I think especially in the House,
fake.
It's so fake. You have a Republican controlled House in Texas, and yet you have Democrats serving as committee chairs. I will tell you right now, they have had massive problems with Republican speakers in Texas, because remember, when you vote for speaker, it's the total body of the legislature. So you can work a deal with moderate Republicans and Democrats in order to get elected speaker, and then you appoint Democrats to committee chairmanships. So it's a total betrayal. There really needs to be a conservative revolution in Texas, but it looks like it might be happening. And so I'm going to predict right now that as I look at this, I think Ken Paxton has a really good chance at winning this, because I think John Cornyn pretty much got all the votes he's going to get. Now, again, it's a primary, and primaries always have a lot lower voter turnout than the general election. But I don't think John Cornyn, like when I look at Wesley Hunt, got 289,422 votes. If you, again, this is my opinion, Christian, you tell me yours. If you voted for Wesley Hunt and now he's no longer in the race, you are probably now voting for Ken Paxton. Probably. Is that fair?
Most likely.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of Wesley Hunt voters breaking toward John Cornyn. As far as these other ones, like, Sarah Candy and Ann Bender, and I don't know. I don't know enough about again, you look at some of these candidates and they don't even have a picture by their name, right? But they still got 25,000 votes here, 24,000 votes here, because this is a statewide race. But I think Ken Paxton has got a great chance to win this, and it would send a very, very important message, because again, John Cornyn is one of those people in the United States Senate that we cannot rely on as Republicans to actually do the right, hard thing. If it's totally easy and it's fine and it's an overwhelming thing, he might do it unless he thinks he can get something by voting differently. So I think John Cornyn needs to go, and I think Ken Paxton's strong turnout here is a good thing. Let's go ahead and look at the county results here. So this is, you see where John Cornyn won, right? Look, John Cornyn won largely around urban centers.
Austin was his stronghold.
Yeah. If Austin is your stronghold as a Republican, that tells me all I need to know. Right. And where did Ken Paxton win? He won big around the border, right?
East Texas, which is very conservative.
Yeah. Well, and he did fine in, certain areas of West Texas as well. But across the board, again, I think Ken probably wins this overall. I think Ken probably wins this.
Do you have a specific county that you're looking for, or city? Because I can tell you.
No, I didn't have one in particular, unless you found one that you think is interesting.
I mean, if you look at Harris County, which is Houston, that's in the southeast. It's further east, just north of that red county, just north. There you go. That's Harris. That's like the largest county in Texas. It's got something like 4 million people. Look at how close it was there.
Yeah.
Cornyn didn't even get 40%. Yeah. And Houston is Harris County. It's interesting because Harris County is one of the largest counties in America, and it's a Democrat-leaning county, but not, you would think, overwhelmingly, right? It's heavily minority, urbanized, 4 million people. It's like Chicago-sized. You would think, oh, it's like 70% Democrat, and it's like 53% Democrat. So there's a lot of Republicans there. And I mean, again, Cornyn won it, but he only got a plurality. He didn't even get 40%.
Well, and Hunt did better on average here than he did across the state. And again,
that makes sense because I believe he's from that area for his congressional seat.
And let's say 70% of Hunt's vote breaks toward Paxton. I mean, he wins Harris County.
He probably wins the statewide primary at that point. You have the same thing in Dallas and Tarrant. Tarrant County is heavily suburban, historically ancestrally Republican. It was one of the first parts of Texas to flip to the Republican Party, like way back in like the 60s and 70s. But it's also traditionally filled with rhinos.
Yeah.
And the fact that John Cornyn couldn't even get 50% in Tarrant County, like that is the type of county that he would get over 50% of the vote.
Between Tarrant and Dallas, Dallas, he got over 50%.
That makes sense.
And then you look at Travis County, which is Austin, he got over 54%. This is why I say, like, on some of these, it's a little bit, when you get into some of these other smaller counties, you usually end up running up against something that there's something strange about it, or there's some sort of industry, or there's some sort of, something that explains the loyalty toward Cornyn that wouldn't otherwise be explained by just the demographics of the county. But when you look at these big urban areas, that's an easy one. Republicans in big urban areas tend to be less conservative. And so they break toward the less conservative candidates. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the general. Again, primaries are not always the best indicator because it's just a much smaller universe. But this was the most expensive. I think it was the most expensive primary in history. It's something like $110 million spent between all the candidates. And so again, it's something to watch. Now, the other interesting thing about this has to do, let me break back to the bigger maps here. And that is the Democrat primary, because Jasmine Crockett will no longer be in Congress. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. She had to give up her House seat in order to run for the United States Senate. And interestingly enough, she lost to Whitey. She lost to this cracker here, James Talarico, who honestly,
isn't that a Hispanic last name?
I don't know. I think James is horrible. Jasmine Crockett is amusingly horrible.
She is very funny.
She is funny horrible. Like it is. And she's not done in politics, right?
Talarico is a snake.
He is.
We were talking snake. Right before the cameras were rolling, and I can't remember who it was, but there's this tweet from many years ago about how progressives will hollow out your religion and wear it like a skin suit.
Yeah.
He is the living embodiment of that phenomenon right there. Yeah. He presents himself as this Christian pastor, and he'll say things like, the trans community needs abortion access.
Yeah.
Like, that's the most heretical thing I've ever heard in my life. He
sat there on Joe Rogan and explained how
God is non-binary.
Yeah, God is non-binary. He said that in an event in 2021. And then he was on Joe Rogan explaining how when Gabriel asked Mary's permission on whether or not, it's like, that is not how that went down. So he openly lies about scripture. But he was a seminarian. He went to seminary, and so now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe. Yeah, right.
Explains.
But here's the map here on where Jasmine did well, and
she did well in East Texas.
She did well in East Texas, and then James did well in West, and then once again he did pretty well in the urban centers. What is
he crushed her in the Austin metro area?
Yeah. Oh, bad 75%.
It was a 50-point margin in Austin and Hayes County, which is the suburban county just to the south of
it.
And
then she won in Dallas and Iran, and then
she won Dallas and Houston, but not by overwhelming margins. And she won the eastern part of the state where there's more black voters. There were some politicos online that were pointing out, from the left's perspective, of course, they were worried at how racially polarized this primary was. You can't see it here because this is the county level results.
Yeah.
But if you had a precinct level map of the election results in Texas, you would see exactly what I'm talking about. Because
let me see if I can bring one up here real quick. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Okay. So if you look at that, and then there you go. So I'm going to pull these two together. All right. So there we go. That's where Jasmine Crockett won, right there in East Texas.
Complete overlap.
And that is where the largest concentrations of black voters are in East Texas. So you can, that's the part where, again, when you look at the white liberals voted for James and black Democrats voted for Jasmine Crockett.
Hispanics also voted for Talarico as well.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. Like, you can't win as a Democrat in Texas with just the black vote, even if you're winning it overwhelmingly. And she did obviously win it overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
That's why it was close, right? But you can't pull it off. There's not as many black voters in Texas. And so if you're winning white liberals and Hispanics, the Hispanics that haven't flipped to the Republicans, because a lot of them did.
Yeah.
you're going to end up winning. But from the Democrat perspective, they're freaking out because they're like, we basically have a race war going on within our party.
Yeah, they do. They do. Well, and Jasmine Crockett went like, she really leaned into that all the way. Like she made that her entire identity. James passed himself off as
a moderate.
Oh, I'm a Christian Democrat who is explaining how the Bible doesn't say any of the things that the Bible actually says. What the Bible actually says is we should all be woke progressives, just like Jesus. And it's like, again, I want to go through some of the things that he did, his distortion of Christianity, claiming God is non-binary. In a 2021 speech in the Texas legislature opposing Republican-backed legislation on youth sports and transgender participation, Talarico declared that God is non-binary, right? Asserting atheists are more Christ-like than Christians, opposition to Christian nationalism. Keep in remember, they consider, if you want your Christianity to inform your politics, they consider that Christian nationalism. This guy has been like, openly supportive. He argued on Joe Rogan that the Bible permits abortion. On Joe Rogan's podcast in September 2025, Talarico claimed the Bible supports abortion by citing the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel asked Mary if this is something she wants to do. That is not even how that went down. Implying consent equates to choice. So let me get this straight, James. Your seminary taught you that if Mary had said, no, I don't want to carry the Savior in my womb, then the response would have been, well, I guess we're going to abort it then. That's what you think would have happened. That's how you think that narrative would have played out. Like how ignorant of scripture do you need to be to think that that's the thing? Advocacy for LGBTQ. Talarico's positions on gender and sexuality are seen by conservatives promoting cultural Marxism over biological reality and family values. Support for transgenderism in children. He backs policies allowing transgender youth participation in sports and access to, quote, gender affirming care. First of all, stop calling it gender affirming care. It's not. It's dysphoria affirming care. All right. If you were bulimic, we wouldn't give you diet pills and encourage you to throw up and call it weight affirming care, right? We would say, no, you have a dysphoria and we're affirming the dysphoria, which is bad. You don't affirm the dysphoria. You attempt to cure the dysphoria. Talarico has claimed that the Bible supports same-sex unions. Like this is, first of all, I don't think you should forget the Old Testament, but just for argument's sake, for the people that believe, oh, well, that's old New Testament or that's Old Testament law, it doesn't apply because there's differences with what applies, because there's ceremonial rules in the Old Testament that no longer apply, but that doesn't mean that all Old Testament law gets thrown out. But let's just look at the New Testament. When you look at Romans, it's pretty obvious that you're not supposed to do the homosexual stuff. Now, whether you like that or not, all right, fine. Maybe you say, well, I don't want Romans to influence my politics. All right, if you want to take that position, go ahead. But for him to claim that the Bible not only is, there are some people that say the Bible doesn't say anything about homosexuality, which is blatantly false. Blatantly false. But at least that is trying to claim that it's neutral. No, he's trying to claim that the Bible supports same-sex marriage.
That it celebrates.
Which is absurd. Which is absurd. That is bald-faced heresy. Talarico claimed the Bible supports same-sex unions, which conservatives reject based on passages like Romans 1:26 and 27. This is seen as redefining sin to align with progressive politics. It absolutely is. And then, of course, he's bad on education. He's bad on gun control. He had his own racial controversy in 2026, this year. Talarico forced backlash over an alleged private remark calling former rival Colin Allred a mediocre black man, though he denied it was racial and clarified it referred to campaigning style. Look, the bottom line is that the Democrats are constantly running into their own standards that they set up, which are completely unattainable or ridiculous or contradictory. But what's bad about Talarico is Crockett is one of these people that just ran as who she was, kind of an outlandish, extreme, hardcore, feminist,
she did not try to hide
Black
who she
Lives
was.
Matter candidate. That's who she was. Talarico is again, he has gutted Christianity and he's wearing it as a skin suit. And now he's not only making the nefarious claim that the Bible is neutral on issues for which it is not neutral, he is actually engaging in heresy and blasphemy by saying that the Bible supports things that the Bible clearly does not support. But then you see a lot of people going, oh, look, see, James is the one claiming that woke progressives are the real Christians. Yeah, that's right. Because aborting children through all 9 months of pregnancy and then surgically mutilating the ones that get out and have gender dysphoria, that's a real biblical proposal, right? Right, James? No, this is just straight up heresy. And for all the people that think, whew, we dodged a bullet because we didn't get Jasmine Crockett, who would not have won a race in Texas. I got news for you. James doesn't win either. This guy is going to get excoriated by an emerging younger voting demographic, which is becoming more and more Christian and is quite frankly tired of all the freaking trans crap. Like the fact that you're still going to run on the trans stuff is just mind-boggling. Even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took the pronouns out of her bio over the last election because she realized, yeah, maybe, chemically castrating gender-confused 12-year-olds was a bad idea. Not James, though. James says not only is it good, it's biblical. Good luck with that, dude. I think this guy's getting crushed in the general. And look, these are the sort of things I want to get crushed in the general election. To be honest, Jasmine Crockett would have been easier to beat statewide in Texas, but I feel like we've already kind of beaten the whole critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, do what I say or you're a racist narrative. The white progressive, no, actually, I'm the better Christian by supporting transgender surgical operations for minors. That's the part that needs to be crushed. The part where it's like, no, really, if you're a true Christian, you allow tens of millions of people to pour over the border to include child molesters and, murderers. And if you disagree with that, well, then you're the sort of person that would have rejected Jesus. That's the thing I want crushed now in general elections. And so I'm glad we had an opportunity to do it in Texas. Okay, there was another, the other one I wanted to get to, the last one that we're kind of go through is this is the Attorney General's race. The Attorney General's race is the primary is interesting. I don't think the Democrats really have a shot at winning this one, to be perfectly honest. I think they're going to lose. I think most people right now, if there's any race that is generally safer for Republicans in districts, it's usually what we might call the law and order races, because let's face it, a lot of people, if you are middle of the road, if you tend to be more moderate and maybe you can go back and forth, you generally don't want woke progressives as your sheriffs, as your police chiefs, or as your district attorneys or Commonwealth attorneys, because they're horrible. Virginia was the one race that we came the closest to winning in Virginia was the Attorney General's race. And Democrats still voted in lockstep for a guy that is weak on crime, weak on immigration, and fantasizes about Republican children dying in the arms of their mothers. That's how bad the Democratic Party has become in a place like Virginia. I don't think it's gotten quite that bad in Texas, but it's getting there, right? Like anybody who thinks that there's still moderate Democrats out there, no, there aren't. The only moderate Democrats that exist are in the campaign season. There's no moderate Democrats once they get elected. And you need to understand that. The only moderate Democrats that exist are temporary moderates, and it's only for the campaign season. Once they get power, they are far left Democrats, period, the end, across the board, 100%. It's just a varying degree of how crazy they are, right? That's it. That's it. That's what you got to choose from in the Democratic Party, and more people are waking up to that, and that's a good thing. But in the Attorney General race, the reason why I say that, one, I think we're going to win, and two, you're going to get a conservative either way, is because the race is between Mays Middleton and Chip Roy. And Mays Middleton won 39.2% of the vote, and then Chip Roy got 31.6%. There was a ton of candidates in here, not a ton of candidates, but you had two other candidates that actually took significant portions of the vote. Joan Huffman got 15.1%. Aaron Reitz got 14.2%. So when you have the two top vote getters getting under 40%, you have a race on your hands. You definitely have a race on your hands. And it really is a race between who voters think is the most conservative. Now, Mays Middleton is a very, very conservative Texas state senator. Chip Roy is a very, very conservative member of the House. Both of them were running on who was more MAGA, right? Like that's what they were running on. Now, I will tell you right now, I like both of these guys. I have been a big fan of Chip Roy for a long time because Chip Roy was willing to do very, very difficult things in the House of Representatives when it came to challenging for leadership and things like that. When he was challenging the speaker, the past speaker, I thought that was necessary, and he took a lot of heat for it, to include a lot of heat from his own side. But I always admire people that are willing to take heat from their own leadership. And Chip Roy is always, he has a long track record of being able to do that. So I don't believe that there's a whole lot of daylight on principle between Middleton and Chip Roy. The biggest difference in this race, in my opinion, is not on principle. It's one on the ability of Mays Middleton to self-finance because he's a rich dude. And so he's got a lot of money. I think he's put $10 to $12 million into his own race at this point, which again, that's fine. He has every right to do that. I'm not trashing him for that. But the other thing is, this is an attorney general's race. And from what I understand, Mays Middleton doesn't have any courtroom experience. He doesn't have any real trial law experience, and Chip Roy does. And so to kind of break that down here, Chip Roy, former U.S. Congressman, Chief of Staff to Ted Cruz, and first Assistant Attorney General under Ken Paxton before becoming a critic of Paxton. Strong legal and federal government experience, including time in the DOJ as a practicing attorney, and he emphasizes, his knowledge of Washington, but he emphasizes it as he has this knowledge, so he knows where the bodies are buried and he knows how to fight. And there's no question that Chip Roy will fight the establishment. No question. Chip Roy has built a reputation of being willing to fight the establishment, and he knows how to do it, right? So the argument that he's making here, where someone's going to accuse him of being a Washington insider, no, he has the insider information you want in a guy like Chip Roy, who will then use it to know where the bodies are buried and dismantle things that you want dismantled. Mays Middleton is a Texas state senator from the Galveston area, businessman with oil gas background and prolific GOP donor. He lacks courtroom or prosecutorial experience, but he focuses on the legislative record and conservative policymaking at the state level. So here's the question that you have to ask yourself if you're a voter in Texas. How important is it to you that your attorney general have actual courtroom experience? I don't think it's the end all be all. Right? Like, for instance, if you had someone that had really good courtroom experience, but they were a moderate or they were a squish, I would say, no, go for the person that's a conservative. Why? Because largely what the attorney general is going to do is select the people that are going to run and choose which legal battles they want to face. That's the primary job of the attorney general. It helps a lot if they have legitimate courtroom experience, trial experience, all of that stuff. That helps. But it's not as important as them being principled. Right? Principle is the most important with respect to your attorney general, because if you've got a squish, well, then all that means is they don't fight any of the battles that you want, even though theoretically they should know how. So if this were a question between one guy that was principled and one guy that wasn't, I would say go with principle first every single time. You have two guys here that I think are arguably both principled, but Chip does have more relevant experience that is relevant to the office that he is seeking. So again, I'm just telling you, I think that's a legitimate thing to take into consideration. But when I look at these results, I'm going to be honest, I would have expected Chip to do better here. And I don't know, because we're not talking about a genuine incumbent, because Ken Paxton, vacated to run. And again, Chip Roy and Paxton have had their own issues. I don't know how these votes between Joan and Aaron break between Chip Roy and Mays. Do you have any insight into that, Christian?
I mean, in all honesty, it's definitely a toss-up for the runoff, but considering the margins in the first round, well,
let's look at this map.
Middleton is probably going to win this thing.
Middleton does far better in East Texas.
Yes.
And Chip does better in West
North
Texas. Yeah. And in North Texas. And well, that's oil.
I was saying more like Dallas, not the Panhandle.
Well, but I'm talking about like in places like Midland and stuff like that, where there's a ton of money in oil, and a lot of oil people are GOP donors. And what that means is Mays probably has connections there that either get him donations or prevent Chip from getting donations.
If I had to choose who I would vote for, I probably would vote for Chip Roy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You're down what, like 7 points or something like that in the first round. Like that's pretty hard to overcome. And
yeah, I think
it's a clear geographic divide. Let's put it like that.
Big time. And Chip does far better on the border than Middleton does. This is going to be interesting to watch, because a lot of this just doesn't seem to quite make sense.
Well, it does to me, because you got to remember, like, Chip Roy's old congressional district stretched the highway between San Antonio and Austin.
Yeah.
And he had the counties that were to the north and west of both of those areas. So,
yeah.
Austin's there in Travis, and then if you follow that corridor down, you will see Bexar County.
What you see in a lot of this is that you don't see many counties where anybody won 50%.
Well, that makes sense, because it was like, what, a 4 or 5-way primary?
Yeah, but you would expect some strongholds. And I'm okay. Wait, there you go.
That's Chip Roy's district.
Yeah. So when you're looking at those, but even then it's 55%, 48, 59. Okay, that's a strong one. But again, it's 6,000 votes, right? You get up into these ones with, a little bit 41,000 votes, 42 to 31. You get down here into Harris.
I'm just not surprised in a 4-way primary that nobody gets 50% almost anywhere in a highly competitive 4-way primary.
Yeah, this one right here where Middleton like 2x'd him and Harris. I mean, that's significant. I don't know. Again, this is nothing against Mays, because I think I've met Mays once before, but I just don't know him very well. Everything I've heard has been good. I do know Chip, and I consider Chip to be a really good guy. Everybody will find things they don't like about somebody, or what they did, or a vote they took, or a strategy that they had, or whatever it is. But in the end, I will say this: provided that Texas chooses a Republican attorney general, I don't think they can lose, because the two guys they have are very, very good. If I was voting, I would probably be voting for Chip Roy. And a lot of that is based, and again, it's not because I think Mays is a bad guy. It's more of, I know Chip better. And I've seen Chip fight in ways that I'm always looking for. I think Mays has too on the state level. But the other thing that I would say here is that being an attorney general is important for two reasons. One, obviously you're dealing with a lot of stuff domestically for your state, but a big role of the attorney general has been confronting the federal government. Now, you're not going to have to do that as much with Trump in office. But now all of a sudden, I want you to imagine, I mean, God help us, I want you to imagine a Gavin Newsom presidency. You want somebody you want an attorney general that is going to fight back against federal overreach. And so that aspect is important. And that's where I think Chip's experience, both in the courtroom and with respect to the federal government, could be beneficial to that office. But I want to be very, very clear here. I'm not in any way, shape, or form denigrating Mays. Everything I know about the guy is a really good guy. I've just known Chip longer. And I think Chip is a really good guy. I've always been really, really impressed with him. So that's kind of my overall breakdown for what just happened in Texas. Now I want to kind of like do final thoughts between Christian and myself on, obviously Texas wasn't the only primaries taking place, but it was probably the most significant for the country, and also demonstrating something about where the Republican base was at. I want to add this. I think with what happened with Tony Gonzalez, now you have a major scandal there, so that's a little bit different. What happened with Dan Crenshaw, I think, is definitely a revolt of the base. And I think what I'm surprised about is that there's other Republicans that probably should have drawn primary challengers that did not. And I think some of that is a lack of organization for the base when it comes to primaries. But I think there's something at least demonstrated here that when you look at the attorney general's race, when you look at the Senate race, the base is moving toward hardcore conservatives. And they're even willing to overlook some disadvantages, whether it be money, whether it be name recognition. And they're even willing to overlook some things which would fall into scandals, right? Like with Paxton. And they're basically saying, give me a hardcore conservative that will do what I want and stop telling me about the other things. I don't care. And I think this is a really, really powerful message for the United States Senate right now. Because I think one of the biggest problems that we have is people will vote for Trump because they believe Trump will do what he says with respect to the power that he has. Now, there's a lot of people that are getting frustrated with Trump over things that don't make sense, because it's like your frustration is misplaced. It should be directed at Congress. Now, if you're frustrated with Trump over the Epstein files, I totally get it. If you're frustrated with Trump because you think he's too involved in foreign affairs, okay, but that is one of the primary functions of the president of the United States, not the domestic stuff, the foreign stuff. But a lot of these other stuff, well, he hasn't cut as much stuff as I want, or he hasn't done this as much as, yeah, that's because he's waiting on Congress to do something. And so there's a lot more frustration among the Republican base with Congress than there is Trump. And a lot of people in Congress are confused. They think that, oh, look at all these Republican voters that voted for Trump. Dude, those are Trump voters. They're not Republican voters. And if you don't do something with the power that you have, they're not going to accept your campaign strategy of vote for us or else the Democrats will be really, really bad. Yes, you got to give voters something to vote against. You have to. But you also get to give them something to vote for. And right now, I believe that the single greatest thing that the Republican Congress could do to prove that they're serious and that they have listened to the base and that they are willing to do something substantive is the SAVE Act. If they pass the SAVE Act, that will cover a multitude of other things that the base is frustrated with and probably energize the base to get out and vote. That will be the thing that we can vote for. I hope the lesson from this, and I hope the lesson that John Thune will learn in the Senate is there's no more excuses. We will replace well-funded, high name recognition, repeat incumbents with underfunded challengers unless you do something. That is my hope, that they will receive that message and do something. What is your analysis of what happened in Texas?
Well, I mean, it was as close to a clean sweep for, the anti-establishment forces as you could probably expect. Obviously Paxton didn't win outright.
Yeah.
But he forced a runoff, which, I mean, that's kind of a victory in of itself when you consider that Cornyn has basically walked in to the last 2 terms, and they're 6-year terms when you're in the U.S. Senate. Yeah. So
Cornyn's never really had a serious challenger.
Not really.
Which is amazing because he's one of the guys, when you look at Cornyn's voting record and public statements and the state he represents, you would think people would be lining up to challenge him. And for some reason, people haven't. And Paxton was the one willing to do it. Now, you could argue maybe there were other candidates that would have been better. I don't know. But Paxton was willing to do it. And I feel like the people of Texas have rewarded him. And with Wesley Hunt out of the race, I think he's got a real shot at winning this. And I think that sends very, very powerful messages because John Cornyn, for all intents and purposes, has deserved a primary challenger, hasn't gotten one of any significance, and now he does.
I definitely agree. So that's good news. The mere fact that a runoff has been forced in this race is good news because it's probably going to compel somebody. You got to think about it from this perspective. Between now and the runoff, Cornyn has a motivation to maybe push the U.S. Senate to pass some conservative stuff potentially for him to beef up his chances in the runoff.
Well, the U.S. Senate, this is a place too where John Cornyn, because Lisa Murkowski is never going to listen to a Ted Cruz.
No, but she might listen to him.
But she might listen to a John Cornyn because John Cornyn can go over to Lisa and be like, Lisa, it costs you nothing to vote for the SAVE Act. In fact, your people would like it. But you sitting on the sidelines because you want to play petulant little fighting games with Donald Trump is going to cost me my seat in Texas. Because I will tell you right now, if the U.S. Senate doesn't pass the SAVE Act, John Cornyn is probably first on the chopping block.
Yeah, so you've got that. Tony Gonzalez, I think, has, 50-50 odds that he can be defeated in the runoff against Brandon Herrera.
I think it's better than 50.
His record, I probably agree with you. I'm just being, me, I'm being pessimistic.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm going to say right now, 60-40, Brandon Herrera beats Gonzalez.
You're not saying the margin, you're saying likelihood.
Likelihood. Yeah. I think he's probably going to probably win in the runoff by 5 to 6 points.
Okay. I mean, he lost previously by 400 votes.
Yeah.
2 years ago. So just keep that in mind.
I think
this very close. It was 1 point.
Yeah, but I think this time around he wins by, I'll say no more than 5. How about that?
I mean, to me, the biggest takeaway of this whole thing, because I think a lot of people were expecting Paxton is actually a good candidate for a Republican primary. I know a lot of people are like, he's going to, weaken us in the general election. Okay, the fact of the matter is that Paxton, Cornyn had been primaried in the past by relatively weak candidates, and he would blow them out of the water. Paxton was not a weak candidate in a Republican primary. And we already knew that Tony Gonzalez was going to be primary by Herrera again after he barely defeated him by only 400 votes 2 years ago. And we knew that was going to be a highly contentious election. Yeah. And we knew that it was going to be even more controversial than before because of the scandal that broke out. Mm-hmm. But to me, the biggest takeaway was Dan Crenshaw just getting absolutely destroyed in his own primary. I mean, it wasn't even close, and he was the incumbent.
The two biggest surprises to me were Dan Crenshaw and Cornyn and Paxton. Not because I didn't think Paxton could put up a fight against Cornyn, but as close as it was against a powerful long-term incumbent senator in Texas, that's significant. And again, both of it demonstrates anti-incumbent sentiment. And now every year we talk about anti-incumbent sentiment, and then people will point out that, 93% of incumbents usually win their seats back. Yeah, that's true. you need to understand the anti-incumbent sentiment doesn't mean that all of a sudden all the incumbents are losing. They're incumbents for a reason. But when all of a sudden you have a larger percentage of people losing than normal, it sends a powerful message. And the important thing about this is, let's say Dan Crenshaw won his primary by 15 points. Let's say that Cornyn won a majority and there was no runoff. Let's say, let's say those two things happened. John Thune would look at that and be like, I don't got to pass the SAVE Act. I can go through the performance. I can go through the political theater. I can bring it up for a vote and have it lose in cloture. And I can do all that and claim that we can't do anything because of the filibuster and get away with it. John Cornyn right now is slamming John Thune's door saying, holy hell, if we don't get something done significant, I'm done. And John Thune doesn't want to lose a John Cornyn. He sure as hell doesn't want to lose a John Cornyn to a Ken Paxton. That's the dirty little secret.
That'd be like another Ted Cruz situation.
Yeah, leadership likes predictable votes. And when I say that, they like predictable votes to go with leadership. They
don't like predictable votes against them.
They don't like predictable. Leadership has a board in their office, and they have all the people that they know how they're going to vote, and then they have the outliers. And the outliers are your hardcore conservatives. They're your Ted Cruzes. They're your Rand Pauls. They're guys like that they're not going to just do it because leadership says so. You have to actually present an argument to those guys, and they're willing to push back against you. And they don't want guys like Paxton. They want guys like Cornyn. Because Cornyn will show up and do what he's told and get the money from all the right PACs and do the whole thing. But those guys also learn from primaries. Like perfect example, my wife, Tina, ran against Emmett Hanger. Emmett Hanger represented an R+70 district. There was no possible way Emmett Hanger could lose his race in a general election. And yet he was one of the more liberal voters of the Republicans in the Virginia Senate. And then what happened? He got a primary challenge. And he got a primary challenge during session. All of a sudden, his voting record went more to the right. And then he had to spend $650,000 to win a seat that he had controlled for 27 years. Yeah. He had to win it. And the bottom line is that he voted differently. I know because I had other people come up and thank me for, Emmett Hanger just got a lot easier to predict on his votes for the budget and everything else because now he has a Republican challenger from the right. And he can't get away with this crap anymore. So this is the part where I think this could be beneficial, and I think this could impact the vote on the SAVE Act. There's a lot of controversy over this. Mike Lee has done the best job of, I think, anybody in the U.S. Senate of actually articulating what's going on and why they need to go back to the speaking filibuster, because he doesn't think the Democrats have the juice to actually do the speaking filibuster, and we could actually get a no-kidding vote on it where we could win by a simple majority. The important thing to remember here, though, is, and this is the part that's going to be very controversial to include with other Republicans, the filibuster will be dead within 6 years. It will either be dead because the Republicans killed it to pass the SAVE Act or something else, or it will be dead because the Republicans will lose the Senate and Democrats will kill it immediately.
They won't kill it until they have a trifecta again at the federal level. But the next time they do,
you think they'll wait for a trifecta?
Well, what is the point of killing the filibuster if you can't actually pass anything?
To just kill it.
To
force vetoes, to force presidential vetoes on things that they think that they don't want vetoed.
Well, I mean, then put it that way. They won't kill the filibuster unless they control both chambers of Congress.
Okay, that's fair.
Right? There's just no reason.
Yeah. But I think, I won't say within the next 6 years. I will say within the next 8 years, I predict that the filibuster will be gone one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to, in my opinion, it's going to happen within the next decade. But I mean, there's a lot that could happen within the next decade. Yeah. So
that's my prediction. We'll see what happens. But what it also means is that, keep in mind, the same Democrats that are now saying that the filibuster is a sacred institution of the Senate, we're calling it a Jim Crow era racist policy.
These are the same people that spent the last decade lecturing us about how America is an evil, white supremacy, settler colonial state built on slavery and genocide, and then turn around and then give State of the Union address responses about our democracy and our founding fathers and our Constitution. Yeah. When they spent the last decade trying to tear all these things down. They're just tools for these people.
Scott Jennings actually said it best, I thought, on CNN, where he basically said, you know what? You guys can't even get it right on gender. You can't even get it right on biology. I don't care what your opinion is on taxes anymore. And I've said a lot of the same thing. Like, if you're the sort of person that can honestly tell me, well, men can get pregnant. Well, what I mean by that is, trans men can get, and you want to fight over these categories of knowledge, established categories of knowledge. I don't care what your opinion is on pretty much anything anymore. I don't take you seriously because you're incapable of having a good faith debate. And I'm not wasting time with people that can't have good faith debates. So yeah, that's just where I'm at right now. I think this was a positive. If you are a grassroots baseline conservative voter, I think what happened in Texas was good. Could have been better, but not by much. Not in a realistic world. So I think this was a good sign across the board. We'll see what happens next. By the way, also want to mention, got a book coming out. That's right. April 14th is when it's going to finally launch, but you can pre-order it right now. It's right there over my shoulder. It's called The Man Book. And what this book is, look, I've been alive for 46 years. I've been married for 26 years. I've been a father for 22 years. I did 10 years in the legislature. I got a couple combat tours over in Iraq. All of that to say, I've lived a little bit of life and I've learned a couple of things. And I wrote this book not to lecture people. I wrote it to say, kind of, here's some stuff I would have liked to have known. If I could do it all over again, if I was going back and I was that 19-year-old that was about to get married, here's some of the things I'd like to know about life, about marriage, about raising a family, about going to war, about politics, about my faith. Here's some stuff I'd like to know. I learned it the hard way, so you don't got to. So The Man Book, you can pre-order it pretty much anywhere you would pre-order a book right now. Go ahead and check that out. Also, if you are interested in being patriotic quicker, all right, brew around and find out coffee. That's right. We have a great partnership going with First Cup. You can order your own brew around and find out coffee. This is a very, very special blend. Tina, Queen of the Bees, who grew up with her parents actually owning a coffee shop, put together and meticulously put together this blend for everyone here that knows that the 8-hour sleep cycle is propaganda to keep you from retaking the Holy Land. So go get your brew around and find out coffee. Be patriotic faster and quicker. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.